What up, people? You haven't seen my face in a while because I've been doing a lot of audio reviews. But now it's time for my Star Wars reviews. So now, no more Avengers hats. It's time for the Darth Vader cap. As I said in my update video, I'm going to review every single Star Wars movie monthly. And this is not including the Clone Wars movie. And I'm also going to review them in chronological order. I'm not going to review them in release order, because apparently that's what all the cool kids on YouTube are doing nowadays. So with all that being said, let's review the first part of the Star Wars prequel trilogy, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. So The Phantom Menace is the first Star Wars movie chronologically, but it's also the sixth Star Wars movie that we have gotten in history. And it is the first film in the Star Wars prequel trilogy. Now, right off the bat, you should know that I am not a Star Wars prequel hater. Now, do I think the movies are far from great, though, but I'm not a prequel hater. Like, I don't think the prequels are the big pile of crap that the diehard Star Wars fans think they are. But I do recognize that they are not great films. But the fact that I like the prequels, I could be saying this from a nostalgic point of view. But before I explain that, you should know that I am a huge fan of Star Wars. Like, my first exposure to Star Wars was the original trilogy, luckily. But my first exposure to the original trilogy was the 1997 special editions. You know, the one where Greedo shoots first. But I remember, my father, he is a Star Wars fan as well. So when he saw the Star Wars Special Editions came out on VHS, we went to Blockbuster, rented them, he sat me down, and I watched them. Since then, I have loved Star Wars, and I have immersed myself within the franchise. I remember I had the toys. I had a Han Solo Jabba the Hutt action figure. I had Star Wars minifigures. And I had the Luke Skywalker snow speeders from The Empire Strikes Back. I even remember I used to play with Legos back when I was little, and I even thought to myself, you know, what would really be cool if they made Lego Star Wars. And guess what? They did. I got the Lego Star Wars stuff. At the time, I was 8 years old and didn't know what to expect from the new movie. But I do remember they marketed the hell out of this movie. They started selling the toys. I had a Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Jar Jar Binks, and Padawan Ponytail Anakin Skywalker action figures. And they had these little clips that you can scan and they say something from the movie. I had the Lego Naboo Space Speeder toys. Hell, you couldn't get away from a supermarket without the magazine cover being of Star Wars The Phantom Menace. I even remember the Pogs that Pizza Hut, KFC, and Taco Bell was giving out. Now, eventually I started getting hints to what the film was going to be about. Because I remember when we go to Walmart or Target or whatever, they would have these Phantom Menace action figures, and they have these cards that would change from the Phantom Menace character to an old Star Wars character, and it's supposed to be what the character is to the original trilogy. Like, for example, they had Anakin Skywalker, and his card would change to Darth Vader. I'm like, wait a minute, he's a Skywalker. Shouldn't he be changing to Luke Skywalker? And eventually I figured out why after seeing the movie. Alright, I think I've gone too long about the toys, but I bring this up because that is what essentially what Star Wars has become. Just to get something to get people to buy the toys. But that's not necessarily true though. So let's get to the actual movie. So yeah, back in the day, my parents took me to see Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and so you know, I didn't know any better about any movie I saw. I used to think any movie I saw was the greatest thing in the world. Hell, I even to this day still have the movie on VHS. Granted, there are some people like me that don't hate this movie and actually like it. They don't love it, but they like it. But as I got older, I started to ask, like, why do people hate this movie? And so, as I got older, I realized I had a good case of what people called Phantom Menacing. What Phantom Menacing means is you actually like a movie that was bad and you deny that it was bad, but because it's so nostalgic for you and it's connected to another movie and you just don't want to admit that it was bad. And I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I've done this on numerous occasions. Of course, with not only the Star Wars prequels, but I did it with this small little film back in 2007 called Spider-Man 3. Now, as I got older and heard reasons why people didn't like The Phantom Menace, I was like, yeah, I totally understand. Now, when I started watching this movie with adult eyes and, you know, just a couple of days ago, I watched this movie to prep for this video, it finally hit me. Yeah, this movie doesn't really hold up. And why so? Well, let's finally talk about the movie. Now, the main plot of The Phantom Menace is the Trade Federation is doing deals with Darth Sidious, who we all don't know, or most of us probably figured it out by now, but who Darth Sidious is actually Senator Palpatine. Now, this is one of the few things I love about this movie and the entirety of the prequel trilogy. Senator Palpatine wants Queen Amidala to sign something to try to convince the Senate to throw Chancellor Valorum out of power so Palpatine can be Chancellor. Now, on the other side, he's been making deals with the Viceroy, Newt Gunray, and the droid army attack the planet of Naboo. And the Senate has done nothing, so he now controls both parties. It's a little confusing, but ultimately, when you piece it all together, it kind of makes sense. And you realize, yeah, that's a pretty smart thing for a villain to do. And that's why Palpatine is one of the redeeming qualities of these three movies. That being said, you realize that about 60% of this movie is nothing but political dialogue, trade negotiations, peace treaty sightings, and Senate meetings. As I was watching this movie, I was like, what are we doing here? This is a movie partly aimed for kids. They don't want to talk about politics, nor do they know anything about politics, and it's not particularly interesting dialogue about politics. And I'm sure adults don't really want to hear anything politically related within the Star Wars universe. I say particularly the kids because this is the type of movie that made kids just check out and go play with their Star Wars action figures. In any case, we meet young Obi-Wan Kenobi and his Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn. They pretty much try to go reason with the Viceroy and be like, hey, stop this or we'll attack or whatever. Newt Gunray realizes this and sends his droids to attack the Jedi, but they fight back. I do like that scene. It was cool seeing Jedi in their prime and just cleaning house with these droids. We didn't really see that in the old movies. So it was cool seeing Jedi easily slice droids in half, and you'll be like, alright, can I have a challenge, please? Even when I watched this recently, I realized, yeah, the dialogue isn't really that good. That first scene when the Jedi are like, these Trade Federation guys are cowards, but negotiations will be short. And then they set that joke up later in the film where they were like, you're right about one thing, Master. The negotiations were short. So after that, they end up on Naboo where they meet arguably the most hated character in the Star Wars lore, Jar Jar Binks. Now again, I was 8 when I saw this movie for the first time, so Jar Jar didn't bother me, but as I got older and saw everybody hates him, I began to realize why. He is one of the most annoying characters in cinema. I'm not going to go on too long about him because everything that needed to be said about Jar Jar has been said. And even when Qui-Gon meets Jar Jar for the first time, he's like,
the ability to speak does not make you intelligent. Now get out of here.
I wish Jar Jar had listened. But no, when you hear Jar Jar speak, you know, he's all like, no, Misa Speck. Misa called Jar Jar Binks. Misa your humble servant. When I watch this movie, I put on the subtitles because most of the dialogue that Jar Jar has in this movie, I honestly could not understand. And it's like, this character is a little, it's like they gave him some Jamaican accent or whatever. Like, so Jar Jar takes Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon to the Gungan world where Jar Jar was banished, and then they ultimately let Jar Jar go with him to the planet core so the Jedi can get to Queen Amidala. The Trade Federation has taken over the Naboo. Newt Gunray wants her to sign the treaty to make the droid army legal, but she refuses. So the Jedi come to save her, rescue her, and they escape into Naboo, but the Trade Federation ships shoot their ship, and now they have to hide on Tatooine so they can find new parts for their ships, and it's where they meet a young Anakin Skywalker. Now, before the movie came out, I remember seeing this teaser poster of the young Anakin Skywalker and his shadow behind him, which forms Darth Vader. When I saw that, I was pumped. George Lucas must have watched Jingle all the way and said, yes, he is perfect for Anakin Skywalker. And then we finally meet him, and then he starts talking. Are you an angel? An angel? I heard the deep space pilots talk about them. They're the most beautiful creatures in the universe. Like, when you first hear first lines of dialogue, I'd be like, ugh. Now, this wasn't his fault. The majority of the script and dialogue was not that good. And sorry to say, Jake Lloyd is just not that great of an actor. Now, granted, he was a kid at the time, but that's the thing. You have to get directors that know how to work with kids. The best examples of that with Steven Spielberg. He worked well with the kids in E.T. and in Jurassic Park and many others. But George Lucas just doesn't know how to direct kids. He's proven that with this movie. And even with the older actors, George Lucas just, I guess, he just didn't have it in him anymore. And the thing about George Lucas is he has too many yes men around him, and no one behind the scenes didn't tell him, you know, maybe we should try that again. You know, I'm just saying, Lucas. But no, they all just said yes to him because ultimately Lucas signs their paychecks. So therefore, the acting that we got in this movie is what we get because you can't really expect much from a director that only tells his actors faster, more intense. So yeah, back to Anakin. I'm not even going to talk more about him because everything, bad or good, that's been said about him has been said. And I don't blame him. And I'll even have to admit, why does Anakin have to be a child? Why don't you just make him a teenager so that, you know, we can all relate to him? And he's going to be a teenager in the next 2 movies anyway. The real reason we are on Tatooine has come down to this, the pod race scene. Now, personally, I like the pod race scene. It's one of my favorite scenes within the movie. But Anakin enters the pod race so that he can win the parts for Qui-Gon and the others so that they can fix the ship and go to Coruscant. Now, throughout this whole experience, Qui-Gon realizes that the Force is strong with Anakin, and he even makes a deal with Watto. If he wins the race, he frees him as a slave. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the pod race scene because anything bad or good has been said about the pod race. But Anakin, in the end, wins. But I do like that scene, and I find it very entertaining. Now, granted, the pod race scene and the majority of this movie has some things to be thankful for. Like, if it wasn't for this movie, we wouldn't have a bunch of Nintendo games. Now, before I continue on with this story, let's talk more about the other characters. Like Qui-Gon Jinn. I remember when I was young, I used to think he was a cool character. But as I got older, I still think he's cool, but not as cool as I thought he would. Like, forgive me for nitpicking. Like there's this one scene where he first meets Watto and Qui-Gon Jinn. He's trying to get the parts for the ship so that they can get to Coruscant. And all Qui-Gon has is public credits, but Watto doesn't want that. And Qui-Gon tries to use force manipulation on the mind on Watto. And he's like, credits will do fine. And then Watto's like, no, they won't. Credits will do fine. No, they won't! Well, you think you're some kind of Jedi with your arm around like that? I'm like, yeah. Obi-Wan taught us in The New Hope that the Force has a strong influence on the weak-minded. Now, I'm not really sure how weak-minded Watto is, but he is a greedy person, and that can make a person weak-minded or whatever. So therefore, the Force should have a very strong influence over the greedy as well. Like, R2-D2 and C-3PO are in this movie. Now, watching this movie with adult eyes, I'm like, did they really need to be in this movie? Like, R2-D2, yeah, I can roll with him being shoehorned in the movie, but C-3PO was created by Anakin Skywalker. This is what I mean. Not everything and everyone has to be in the movie immediately. And I felt like C-3PO was very shoehorned into this movie, especially since he's created by Anakin Skywalker. So that means, in the original movie, so that means the times where Darth Vader and C-3PO crossed paths, like, Darth Vader wasn't like, hey, I remember I created you. Very awkward. Now, granted, yes, they explained in Episode 3 that 3PO got his mind wiped, so that's why 3PO has really no memory of Darth Vader. But Darth Vader, though, Now, let's talk about Padme Amidala. She is played by Natalie Portman, but there are two different people, though. There's the actual queen. The actual queen is actually a decoy for Padme, because Padme is the actual queen of Naboo. And the decoy posing as the queen is the one doing everything throughout the whole movie. Since I'm talking about Qui-Gon Jinn and Padme, it's a good way to segue into the next part of the movie, which is all the Coruscant stuff. And that's the part of the movie where everyone gets bored out of their minds. Because it has all this political dialogue that no one really cares about. The whole point of this part of the story is just so the Queen can co-sign with the Senator Palpatine to dethrone the Chancellor, so Palpatine can rise in power, and the Queen thinks this will all help defuse her situation on Naboo, and it doesn't, to a certain degree, but ultimately, it does nothing. Jumping back to here, while the Queen and Palpatine are off doing their political bullshit, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan inform the Jedi Council that Darth Maul attacked them on Tatooine, and that means that the Sith are returning, and the Jedi Council will look into it. But it's also so that Qui-Gon Jinn can tell them that Anakin is the chosen one in the prophecy to bring balance back to the Force. Now, which does make sense, because Anakin, he does bring balance back to the Force in Episode 6. But I'll get to that when we get to it. But for right now, let's talk about this. Anakin's mother explains later on in the movie that he never had a father. She carried him, she gave birth, she raised him, she can't explain what happened. And then Qui-Gon pretty much clicks on his head. That means Anakin must have been conceived from the Force. So, yeah, the Jedi that was pretty much conceived from the Force. Conceived from a living thing. Kind of like Jesus Christ was conceived by God. Anakin was conceived by the Force. So pretty much you're telling me that Anakin Skywalker is Jesus. Only difference is Anakin Skywalker, he eventually becomes bad. So you're pretty much telling me that Anakin is Christ gone bad? Now the Jedi Council to a degree believes it, but at first they deny him to be trained. Within the Jedi Council are Yoda and Mace Windu, and they are the most dry, emotionless people in the movie. And they are also dicks because Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, they go with the Queen back to Naboo so that they can discover the secret of the Sith and try to figure all that out. And I'm like, yeah, they're all about to go back to Naboo with their trade federations and droid armies and stuff. Shouldn't all the Jedi go with them? Y'all just gonna stand there and do nothing and just let them... What the hell? Real quick, Yoda is a change in the special edition because, I gotta talk about the special editions in the original films, but there were some minor changes that George Lucas made to the prequels. In the original theatrical cut of The Phantom Menace, Yoda was actually a puppet, but for the special editions, on the Blu-rays or whatever, he changed Yoda to the CGI Yoda. Now, I'm not really over the mood with this change, but it does feel kind of awkward because I grew up watching the puppet Yoda in the Phantom Menace, and now seeing CGI Yoda in the Phantom Menace, it just looks out of place. Like, at least in the second and third movie, they prepped for CGI Yoda, but in this movie, it just feels out of place, and it didn't really, I don't know. It just felt like I was watching a cartoon version of Yoda. And I do feel like it's a bit of a slap in the face to Frank Oz, who plays the voice of Yoda. And if you watch that documentary on the DVD, and I think it's on the Blu-ray, but there's this documentary on the making of the Phantom Menace, which is very revealing, and it's quite cool if you ask me. But during that documentary, Frank Oz not only voiced Yoda, but he also did the puppet work for Yoda in that movie. To me, that is slapping Frank Oz and the work that Frank Oz did on the set in the face. Now again, I mentioned the documentary. You get to see the behind the scenes, and I do not own the Blu-ray because Lucas made one change that I just cannot roll with. I'll let you know, but I'll hint that it is in Return of the Jedi. But yeah, I do not have the Blu-rays, all I just have is the DVDs. Now watching this movie I started to realize this is starting to look a little dated, even for the DVD and not the Blu-ray. The CGI just doesn't really hold up because there is an over-reliance on it. Granted, there's a lot more attempts at practical imagery in this movie than in the next two movies. Granted, when the movie first came out, the visual effects were astonishing, and the movie did get nominated for an Oscar for Best Visual Effects, but lost to The Matrix. Now, either The Matrix won because it was the better film, or The Matrix won because the visual effects were better than the film, which I don't quite see. I find the effects in Phantom Menace a little better than The Matrix. But I do like the effects in The Matrix, and that is no shade to The Matrix, though. I love The Matrix, and quite frankly, more than the Phantom Menace, if you ask me. But I digress. But I'm saying, there is an over-reliance of CGI in this movie, and if you watch that documentary, you can see Lucas with a yellow and pink highlighter. He uses one highlighter to highlight what is real and what was not real. And most of the time, he highlighted what was not real more than what was. Now, before they leave Coruscant, we are introduced to midichlorians. Yes, apparently everyone has this microscopic bacteria in their bloodstream called midichlorians, and that is what the Force is. Apparently, it's not this mystical thing that binds us together with everyone in the galaxy. So we are going back to the Naboo, and now we're setting up for the big finale. Now, there is too much going on in the movie, but it is my favorite part within the movie. But even I gotta admit, yeah, there is too much going on in the movie, and the movie felt unbalanced. And it's like they have 4 different things going on at the same time. Kind of like what they did with Return of the Jedi. They had 3 different things going on at the same time. Now, granted, there is a lot more emotion behind those 3 things, and it felt balanced. This one just kind of didn't really feel balanced, and it was unbalanced with things that, yeah, needed to be there, and semi didn't really need to be there. Like, for example, Darth Maul throwing down with Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, that should be in the movie. Padme and the troops going to invade the Naboo temple to capture the Viceroy, yeah, that should be in the movie. Anakin Skywalker accidentally flying into space and accidentally blowing up the Trade Federation ships, that shouldn't be in the movie. To a degree. Like, the part where the Trade Federation ships blow up, that should be in the movie, but it should happen from the other troops, not Anakin Skywalker, because without the Trade Federation ships blowing up, we wouldn't get the Trade Federation armies eventually stopping. Which brings me to the next thing, the Gungans battling the droid army. That shouldn't really be in the movie. Now, particularly the lightsaber battle at the end is my favorite part, because throughout the whole movie, the Jedis were just battling these droids that they can easily cut in half. And it was cool finally seeing someone that was a challenge to them. And you can argue, yeah, the fight is all choreographed or whatever, but seriously, I actually like the choreographed fights or whatever, because it feels like the Jedi actually have some swordsmanship, because we get to see the Jedi do stuff that we didn't get to see them do in the older movies, and it just felt like the lightsaber battles in the old trilogy, it just felt like they were going buzz, buzz, boom, boom, whack, whack. Now, don't get me twisted, I love the fights in the old trilogy. At least those fights, they had some emotion around it, and I adore them for that. But at least in the prequels, they had some swordsmanship with the lightsaber battles. Now, the fight, I felt, ended well. Now, ultimately, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, they get separated. Qui-Gon is alone with Darth Maul. That fight is briefly tense, but then Darth Maul, he kills Qui-Gon Jinn. And then Obi-Wan like, no! The acting's not the best, but I like Obi-Wan Kenobi in that scene because when he sees his master die, and you can see the emotion on his face, and you can tell he's really pissed. Now, he's not getting angry, and he's not losing sight of himself. He's trying to stay focused because he knows he has to do this for his master. But long story short, Obi-Wan Kenobi, he slices Darth Maul in half. Now, how Darth Maul dies is pretty satisfying, but it's like, Darth Maul, he is a cool character. Why did y'all kill him off this early? Y'all could have brought him back for the future movies. Like, he's such a cool character, and one of the things I liked about him, you could argue he doesn't really say much. Like, all Darth Maul says in this movie is, "Yes, Master. At last, we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last, we will have revenge." But that's one of the things I like about him, is he's very calm, he's collected, and he doesn't say much. He's a mystery. And Darth Maul, he's such a cool character that so many expanded universe books and cartoons and even the Clone Wars series had to bring him back. But they really couldn't have killed Darth Maul that quick. So after this, Palpatine is elected Chancellor, the Trade Federation is gone, Naboo is safe, and Obi-Wan promised Qui-Gon Jinn before he died that he would train Anakin. And so he does. Yoda grants him permission to train Anakin, and he makes Obi-Wan a Jedi Knight. Like, to be honest, it shouldn't have been Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi. It should have just been Obi-Wan and Anakin. They told us in the original trilogy that they were friends, so it should have been focused around them. Obi-Wan shouldn't have really had a master. In the end, again, I'm not a Star Wars Phantom Menace hater. Even though it feels like I've shitted on this movie more than I actually wanted to, I really did get some enjoyment out of this movie. And I think most of us can agree there was some enjoyment out of this movie. And let's be real, y'all, this wasn't a terrible movie. Was this as bad as Batman and Robin or Battlefield Earth or Troll 2? Not remotely. It's not a bad movie, it's just a disappointing movie. If you really hate this movie or just dislike the movie, that's fine, and I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, because I understand why you would hate this movie. But if you're like me and like the movie, and like it for nostalgic reasons, and like it for what it is and what it does for the Star Wars universe and how it plays into the original trilogy, that's cool. Is this my favorite of the Star Wars movies? Hell no! But I do like watching this movie in rotation with the other movies, though, because it makes the story feel complete. I will give Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, a C- for It's a Rental. Thank you all for watching this video. Stay tuned real soon for my review of Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, coming next month. And be on the lookout real soon for my review of Rocky. And that should be coming out real soon, hopefully before the end of the month. And I know I started these videos a little too late because I had a whole bunch of other stuff going on then, because again, I'm doing this monthly, so I can pace myself when doing this. However, if you want to see a more absurdly entertaining review of The Phantom Menace, go to Mr. Plinkett's review on Red Letter Media. Trust me, it's so hilarious and it's so accurate. Like, the biggest Phantom Menace liker or advocate or whatever, he locks it down in a way that you'll be like, yeah, he's kind of right. Watch it, love it, hate it, check it out. The link is in the description below. And tell them Bradford Lassiter sent you. That's it for the day. You like what you see, subscribe to this channel, subscribe to my other channel. The links are in the description below. And be sure to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Periscope, and Movie Pilot. Peace.